So we're starting the program today with a keynote from a prominent and infamous thought leader that I just referenced. So Richard is a best-selling author and strong proponent of CBDCs. He's recently been quoted as saying, "Digital currencies don't follow the rules, they make them." So let's hand swiftly over to Richard, who's joining us live from Shanghai, to find out who is reigning over financial services now and who will be in the future. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and hello to everybody out there. Look, we're going to talk about where finance is going in the next future. And I like to say that the financial future, the center of gravity, if you will, of finance and of innovation is moving toward the east. Now, this is an Airbus A380, right? If you've ever been on a big airplane, a 747 or this Airbus, they start, when they take off, they take a lot of runway. They start out sort of slow, gaining speed, and eventually you feel the nose gear come up and the nose goes up, right? That's the center of gravity you feel moving. The center of gravity moves back, the plane takes off, and that's exactly what Fintech and financial innovation in Asia is doing. It's the same thing. It's had this long runway where it slowly gets better and better and stuff happens and more new interesting things come in the news until finally that nose comes up and innovation in Asia is taking off. And that's where we are now. We're in the air, if you will. And that's an important thing to understand because Asia is now taking this primary role in bringing innovation to the world, to our financial world. So, and it's more than just super apps. If you ask anybody about Asia and finance, they think one thing. Oh, they have super apps out there. And that's true. We do. We have Grab, we have WeChat, Alipay. We have wonderful apps that are truly super, but there's so much more beyond that. And that is only just a small part of what we've got. So clearly we're looking at huge deals. The Grab deal is probably is the most recent one in the news, a $40 billion valuation. So fintech in Asia is a big thing. There's a lot of money behind it. So it's more than just super apps. It's more than just Grab having a big IPO. It's Ant and Alipay. It's the first company that figured out how to use big data to essentially underwrite loans digitally. A full digital underwriting process with 3 minutes to apply for a loan, 1 second to get the reply, and zero. So 310, zero human interaction throughout the entire loan process. So when we think about Asia, we think about these tremendous advances in financial innovation. And we think about it, of course, for Ant, Alipay, and Grab because they're big and in their news, they're big money operations. They make the Wall Street Journal every day. I love the Journal. But how about Bakong, Project Bakong, a digital currency in Cambodia? What? Yeah. So look, this is a great example of a smaller, innovative country reaching out and grabbing the latest of financial technology can offer and setting it up and using it to provide for its people. So Project Bakong basically is just shy of a central bank digital currency. It's more like a real-time gross settlement system, basically a lifetime immediate payment system. But the point is, innovation is everywhere in Asia, and it's turning up in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect it. So look here to Singapore and Thailand. We've got two neighboring countries, and we've got two unconnected payment programs. So these are just simply payment apps. They work domestically beautifully, PayNow in Singapore and PromptPay in Thailand, and they now have a bridge. So I can go directly from paying somebody on PayNow to paying somebody on PromptPay. Innovations that fundamentally change what people can do with money and make it easier to pay than ever. But more fundamentally, Asia is asking this question more seriously than anybody else, and that is, what is a bank? So if we look at our slide here, on the far left, we've got Grab, and in the center, we've got the Alipay app. And what do those two apps have in common? What do they share in common? Something sort of interesting. Grab services those who cannot get banking, the unbanked. And they went to banks and they found that after they had their riding app, many of their drivers simply didn't have banking services. Alipay the same. In the early days, Alipay went to the large banks and said, we want to do e-commerce. Can you provide us with banking services? The answer was no. So what's interesting about both Grab and Alipay, separated by countries, separated by also by some years, is that both of them were born of the incumbent banks not being willing to do the specific business that they were interested in. So, ready? This was banks' business to lose, and they did. Now, what's the third? The third app there. The third app is, of course, China's central bank digital currency app, and that's really fascinating because what we have is the first reimagination and asking, what is money? And interestingly, Asia is on the lead of asking that fundamental question, what is money? And it's not just China. So this is a picture, of course, of China's e-yuan or digital yuan, but other countries, Korea is asking this. Japan is asking this with both having programs, and Indonesia, just in the news yesterday, announcing that it too is committing to build and launch a central bank digital currency. So what happens when Asia and various Asia trading partners all have central bank digital currencies? This is going to be a changed world, and Asia is leading this change. So what's happening? So this, of course, is Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve in the United States. And here's his quote on central bank digital currencies. And I'm using this sort of as an example. We don't feel an urge or need to be first. And I consent that that's perhaps a good statement, but think about it for a moment. The US is saying, well, we are the world reserve currency. We feel no rush to do a central bank digital currency. And that's fine. But there's this sense coming out of the US, there's this sense coming out of the EU to a degree that things are good enough as they are, and we do not need to disturb or disrupt the system. Now, compare this with how Asia's leaders are looking at innovation in the financial sector. Here's President Widodo of Indonesia, who has a presidential decree for financial inclusion to reach 90% by 2024. And he says, please, we are going to extraordinary measures to use Fintech to achieve this financial inclusion. Then we go to the next country. We look at China. Look at President Xi Jinping saying, seize the opportunity presented by blockchain. Here we have the president of a country actually promoting and saying that, hey, blockchain technology is part of a future that we need to live into. Dramatic, to say the least. And let's look at India, which is probably, this is the most beautiful statement ever. I dream of a digital India where mobile and e-banking ensures financial inclusion. So we've got Asian leaders taking a strong and positive stance toward innovation and financial innovation. And we've got the United States saying, well, we're going to do this, but we're going to wait a while. There's no immediate rush for us. And that's the sense. You see the sensation of Asia leaping ahead, and the US and the EU, they're moving. I'm not saying they aren't, but it's a slow and far more methodical process for them. Now, why is this? Very simple. Asia can't afford to wait. So when we look at South and Southeast Asia, there are some 616 million unbanked people. There is a tremendously large rich-poor divide, and there's a huge number of people that without digital services simply aren't going to receive banking services. And that's exactly what China experienced. China experienced this. It has a population of 1.4 billion, and through digital payment, it showed how the country could get a GDP lift and an inclusion lift by bringing digital services to the unbanked. So Asia can't afford to wait, because the longer it waits, the slower it grows. So that's Asia's predicament. Now, the next question that people are going to ask is Asia ready? If Asia is going to become a bigger part of the financial community, there are responsibilities that come with this. So the fundamental question is Asia ready for this? And the best way to do this is to look at some of the solutions that are really game changers, that are potentially changing global relations. And one is coming out of Singapore, which is the Partior blockchain-based cross-border payments platform. So now Singapore, through JP Morgan, DBS, and Temasek, the major investment house in Singapore, have put together a blockchain system that will facilitate cross-border payments. Certainly it's going to start regionally with their regional partners and then expand out from there. But this is not just putting a bank on a mobile phone. This is changing fundamentally the gears, the underlying mechanism of how we move money. And of course, SWIFT should be concerned about this. This is their business, right? So, but what is this? When you look at Partior, it's what I call a potential superhero solution. If it has a large adoption within the Asian nations and starts to branch out, this could be truly country changing for Singapore, making it a much bigger player than it already is in global financial services. But it also does something very distinct and very unique. It brings Singapore it makes it a bigger player in what I call the geopolitical game. Because when we start moving currency flows between nations, we're no longer just working domestically. We're no longer just making the UX better for a financial product. What we do will in fact have global implications for use. So what happens in Asia, and not just to Partior, not just to Singapore? What happens when the US or some country, not to pick on the US, announces sanctions? This is what we see in the news all day long. How will Asia react given it is a growing financial power to these sorts and these types of geopolitical upsets? And how will the individual financial technologies or innovations that come out of this react to this? So the other big disruptor that we see, obviously, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of volatility, is Bitcoin and the dollar. And it's not just Bitcoin. I always say that Bitcoin is the VCR of digital currencies. There's going to be more to come. It's just the first of many. So how will Asia respond to problems or global issues that may arise between digital currencies, particularly as it relates to the dollar and perhaps declining dollar use? So these are the big questions that now transcend the latest fintech innovation, but start to go into this concept of geopolitics. So there is good news on this, and we can look toward Asia managing itself and starting to deal with bigger geopolitical issues through the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, what makes this partnership unique and noteworthy for innovation is that this is an example of Asian countries actually working within their sphere of influence to, in this case, more trade-oriented, but they're working within the sphere of influence without US, without the EU, and they're managing stuff on their own. So a great lead-in. So where are we? We're looking at a future for finance in Asia that is going to have 3 or 4 major components, and they are really simply Asia is going to bring banking digitally to the underserved. Okay, so that's strong point number 1, and the regulatory framework will be changed to allow this. China showed the model of how digital payment could bring financial inclusion to a tremendously large populace. And they're going to do it, as Brett King says, and Brett King is one of your speakers coming up later. Brett says, banking everywhere, never at a bank. And that's true. We've got large populous countries, poor local populations, not enough money for brick and mortar. So we're going to have banking brought seamlessly to the people, and it's going to be digital, and it's obviously going to be on your phone. Now, the other thing is interesting, that Asia is going to have the freedom to choose to reimagine digital money in whatever form it wishes. Now, the key word there is I say freedom to choose. Now, why freedom? I consent that being the reserve currency for the United States is called the exorbitant privilege of being the dollar. But with it comes a responsibility. The United States is not free to change how we transact in dollars quickly or to adopt quickly new technology. Asian countries don't have that problem. When Asian countries look at the cost benefit analysis for, say, launching a central bank digital currency, they see benefit. They see financial inclusion. Their currencies are already not used on a global stage. So for them, when they do this cost-benefit analysis, they have the freedom to use central bank digital currencies, to innovate and to launch them certainly more quickly than the US or the EU, because there's such tremendous benefit for them. So the next thing for the future of Asia is, of course, is that Asia is going to start to manage, and I say, perhaps controversially, Asia is managed by Asians, will be managed by Asians for a wealthier, more mature, and better developed economic sphere. When we look at the RCEP agreement, we're seeing Asia come together and try to make agreement among themselves for trade. And we're going to see more of this. And these agreements are going to be of, by, and for Asian countries to work out what their interests are and work out what's best for them, not just in trade, but in finance. And with so many Asian countries redefining what is money through central bank digital currency projects, you can expect this to be a major movement in the upcoming future. So Asia is going to play a bigger part in what I would call a multipolar financial world, meaning that it's not just London, it's not just Singapore, it's not just New York. Finance is going to be moved. The center of gravity, as I say, is pulling back and it's moving toward Asia. And that's going to be something for the West to deal with. And these have significant implications for our financial future and how we look and how we react to the new innovations that are coming out of Asia. Thank you so much.